My name is Ozzie Nogg, and I was Ozzie Katz before I married my husband, Don Nogg. I was born on May 31st, 1935 in Duluth, Minnesota, which is where my maternal parents came, so that would be my maternal grandparents came from Russia. My Zeta Meyer Glazeman came to Duluth 10 years before my Bobby Russell Glazeman came to Duluth. And I'm not going to get into the stories about what I've heard about the time that they spent apart, but eventually my Bobby Russell and 4 of her children, there had been 8 or 10 I think before, at any rate 4 of her children, including my mother, arrived in Duluth. Mama was 16, I think, when she came here. And she used to love to tell the story about arriving in America with no English as a teenager and being put in public school, she said, in the 3rd grade to learn how to read. And she always wondered what the problem was with other kids her age, because she assumed that those American kids were her age. They were so small, and so she figured that maybe they didn't have enough to eat or something. I don't know, it's a great Baba-Misa, but she learned how to speak English read English, and speak it, along with 3rd graders in a school in Duluth. My Zeta Meyer was, I guess you'd call, a junk man. I remember he had a truck and a Ford. I don't remember what the horse's name was. But I spent a lot of time at my Bobby and Zeta's house in Duluth because when my mother married and had me, I was 9 months old when my biological father died. So we moved into Bobby and Zeta's house on the hill with a white fence in the front and a garden in the back where Bobby planted vegetables. I remember there was a sidewalk in the garden that was wooden slats. And I used to, as a little kid, go with my Bobby and pick carrots right out of the ground, little ones, like about that big, and eat them still with the dirt on them a little bit. Never hurt anybody, no penicillin then. And when I was about 2.5, Mama remarried, and that's kind of an interesting story. If you can picture Duluth, Minnesota, which is across the Lake Superior from Superior, Wisconsin. In Duluth is living my Bobby and Zeta, Meyer and Rachel Glazeman, then with their daughter Bertha and me, 2.5 at that point. In Superior, Wisconsin is living the Katz family, Rabbi Zundel Katz and his wife. And as luck would have it, well, as bad luck would have it probably, they had a son, a rabbi, Alexander Katz, who at that time lived in Fargo. He had just lost his wife, and he was left with 2 sons, David, who was, I think, 12 or so at the time, and Louis, who was about 16 or 17. And so the 2 Jewish communities in Duluth, Minnesota, and in Superior, Wisconsin, got together and said, we have this gorgeous widow with the little baby girl, and this very good-looking rabbi with these 2 sons, and so we have to make a shidduch. And they did. Clearly, I don't remember the details, but Mama married Papa, and together we moved to Fargo, where I suddenly had 2 brothers. So we're picking up where we left off, where I moved to Fargo with my new family. And my brother David My brother David was a big tease. I was in love with the Dion quintuplets, and I had a small radio, kind of beige plastic, and there was a decal of the Dion quintuplets on the top of the radio. And David, knowing how much I loved that radio, used to steal it, swipe it, we used to call it in those days, and he would take it and hide it, not any place where I couldn't find it, but why I still loved him after he did that, I don't know, but I did. My brother Louis, who was enough older than I was, so that here I'm living, we're going now from 2.5 years of age to about 10 when we moved from Fargo to Minneapolis. And a lot happened in those years. The boys grew up, they both joined the service. Louis went to the university, became a very, very well-known scientist, actually. Tried to teach me math. After 5 minutes of my not getting it, that was the end of that. Those days in Fargo, what I remember mostly was snow, huge snow. I mean, literally, drifts. Global warming, I guess, it's not quite that way anymore. But we moved to Minneapolis, where we stayed for about a year. Papa decided, with the urging of his older brother Sam, who already lived in Minneapolis, to leave the rabbinate for a while. Sam was an entrepreneur. One of the businesses he had was making potato chips. And he convinced Papa to come and join the potato chip factory, which he did. Alexander Katz, the rabbi, worked in a potato chip factory for about a year, except on Shabbos. He would not go to work on Shabbos. And until my mother decided that she could no longer deal with the smell of his clothes full of oil, frying oil. And so that put the end to his career in the potato chip business. And we then moved to Omaha. I'm not sure how Rabbi Goldstein found Papa, but he did. And when I was about 10, we arrived in Omaha, Nebraska, where Papa was employed at Bethel Synagogue. And we lived in a very small little duplex off of Dodge and about 38th, 36th, I think it was. And then we moved to a house at 42nd in California, the corner, a big white house. Big porch in the front. And I neglected to mention, and he'll kill me if he sees this, that when I was 7 and still living in Fargo, my brother Michael was born. I'm sorry, Michael. You know I love you. So Michael is now with us in the house in Omaha on California Street. And our memories of that house are totally different. I insist that my bedroom was here and his was there, and he says, no, it's absolutely not that. Catty corner from us on California Street lived Hannah and Harry Mendelson. And I can't tell their story, but someone I'm sure would be able to fill you in on that couple. They were fabulous. I believe the story goes that they were among the pioneers in Palestine. Harry was a Melamed. Hannah became a very good friend of my mother's, and they used to sit and sew together. Mama, being at that point now a rabbi's wife, had to play it a little careful. PC wasn't a phrase that was used back then, but she had to be politically correct when it came to spending more time with Mrs. A than she did with Mrs. B. You had to kind of, be a friend to everyone. I started school at Yates and graduated from 8th grade from Saunders. I have vague recollections of Christmas time in grade school, and my father, the rabbi, saying, fine, sing Christmas carols, it's okay. You know you're Jewish, it's not going to change that. And I have memories of, I don't want to say painting exactly, but drawing on the windows snowflakes with ivory soap. And other than that, my recollections are foggy, always have been. I wish I could tell you more. I had a boyfriend, Joey Lincoln, that I remember. And I also remember, and have a picture to prove it, that when I graduated 8th grade, we're all lined up in this black and white photo. All the girls have on white patent leather shoes, and I have on black suede shoes, because my mother said that, boy, white patent leather shoes were an extravagance, and you aren't going to wear them more than a couple of times, and so I never had any. So there's the picture, and the girl in the black shoes. It's me. Went to Central High School. By then we were living at 4912 Cass in a really adorable little stone house. And I loved Central. I had 4 wonderful years there. I dabbled in theater and was in the operas. Let's see, what did we do? We did the Red Mill, I remember that, and we did the Mikado. I was one of the 3 little maids from school, are we? Yes. I worked on the newspaper, which I enjoyed a lot, and the yearbook. At the end of my senior year, I was bound and determined that I would go to New York and, I don't know, be the next Mary Martin, or not Ethel Merman, because my voice was very small. But I was going to go to New York and just knock them all dead. And I was accepted at Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts. My parents, I think, decided to let me go that far away from home because Brandeis at that time had only graduated 1 class. It was relatively new. And the majority of the student body, or at least that's what the brochures said, the majority of the student body all the students were Jewish. Seemed like a very safe place to go. Of course, when I got there, I found out that it was a much more open-minded school than my parents ever would have imagined, with communist cell meetings but I'll back a minute. The August, the August, I was going to leave for school in August of what would it have been, 1952, 53, whenever I graduated, 53. And 4 weeks before I was to leave for Brandeis, the phone rang, and an unfamiliar voice introduced himself. My name is Don Nogg, and I know you from my friend Marlon Somberg, who's dating Marjorie Shapiro, and I know you're a friend of Margie's sister Lois, and would you go out on a date with me? I had never heard of him, I had never seen him, but my mother said, yes, I know Don's folks, Nate and Ruth Nogg, they're very nice people, it'll be okay. So we made a date, and we went on our first date to a dance at the Highland Country Club, where I don't think I had ever been. And in anticipation of the date, I wanted to look as glamorous as I could because Don was already out of school and working, and I was 18 and he was 25, and okay, I needed to look sophisticated. So I had a black dress that my mother had made, and it was very cute. I remember it was kind of, sweetheart neckline, no sleeves. And I was pale, though. So I decided that I would try to give myself a little bit of a suntan. And I plugged in the sun lamp, and I think the instructions said sit, 2 feet away for 2 minutes at a time. But I've never been a patient person, and so I sat in front of the sun lamp for maybe 10 minutes, really close. And for those of you who have never used a sun lamp, bottom line, I wound up with kind of a purple stripe down the front of my face, which even a lot of Max Factor pancake stuff didn't do a lot to eliminate. But we went out that night, and Donald tells me that even with the purple stripe down the middle of my face, that he fell in love with me immediately. We had a very good time. Very good time. We doubled with Margie and Marlon, and the dance at the club, I don't remember much about that, but the conversation between me and Don was good. Oh yes, after that date, even though I pretended that I wasn't all that interested, I convinced my brother Michael, who at that time, if I was 18, he would have been, 11. I convinced him that I would pay him a dime if, while I was gone, I don't know where, he would answer the phone, and if Don Nogg happened to call, if Michael would take the message, I would give him a dime. And that's exactly what happened. Don Nogg called. And when I came home from wherever I was, Michael said, somebody named Don Nogg called, and here's written down, and so I gave him the dime. And in those days, you did not call the boy back. He called back. We went on a second date to the circus, which I pretended to love, but I hated it. It was August. It was hot. It was in a tent. It smelled. But again, we had a lot of fun. 4 weeks to the day that I met Don, I got on a plane and I flew to Boston for what I pictured to be this huge adventure. And it was an adventure. I met one of the best friends I've ever had in my life there, Ruthie Chapman. If you see this, know that I'm saying to the world how much I love you. I took some fabulous classes. I had Marie Serkin, there's a name from the past, was a professor of mine. I was in shows at Brandeis, which just kind of reinforced this love that I had for the theater. But every day a letter came, or a postcard, or some other form of communication from Donald Nogg in Omaha, Nebraska. He wrote me every day. Sometimes he would stop the letter in the middle and then continue it the second day and continue it even the third day, because even someone as verbal as Don is, you can run out of things to say, But I have all of those letters. Some of them were in the form of crossword puzzles, poems, little drawings like cartoons. I have all of those letters bound in a blue Brandeis University book. And I haven't read them for a while. We've been married now, when I'm sitting here, for almost 63 years. So I'm not sure if I want to just leave the memories or if I want to go back and remember how we talked to one another when we were courting. It might be interesting to do that. Okay, so we got married at Bethel Synagogue, August 22nd, 1954. 1954. Gosh, my math is bad. 1954. In the Old Bethel on 49th and Farnham. Because my father was one of the rabbis at Bethel, and at the time, Don's father, Nate, was the president of the congregation. We didn't send out invitations. Instead, there was an ad put in the Jewish press that announced the upcoming wedding. I think an ad in the Jewish press. So there were a lot of people there. The wedding started at 2, and we have photographs of the receiving line where you can see the clock on the wall. I imagine we got in line about 2:30, and we're standing there, and there are pictures of people shaking our hands at 2:30 and 2:45 and 3:15 and 3:45. And it was great to have that many people want to share in the simcha, but it did go on and on. We had a dinner afterwards just for the family, and then Don and I left for our honeymoon in an absolute downpour, flood, a mubble, like my bubby would have said. And we drove from Omaha. I won't probably get this right geographically, but we drove to Denver. We went to, no, not Denver first. We went to the Black Hills. We went to Yellowstone. We went to Glacier National Park. Calgary, Canada was in there somewhere. And then made the loop back through, that's when we went through Denver on our way home. And I knew before the honeymoon that Don adored traveling and going to foreign places, and knew without a map how to get to wherever we were going. And okay, it was one of the longest honeymoons I think ever in recorded history. And by the time we got to Denver, which would have been about 2.5 weeks later, maybe even close to 3, I think we were both a little bit tired of one another, or at least, a little bored. And when we got to Denver, which was outside of Boulder where Don had gone to school, he had a lot of friends in Denver, and he had alerted them that we were coming. And son of a gun, the night that we got there, there was a stag that all his old fraternity brothers were throwing for somebody. And come on, Egg, which was Don's nickname, come on and join us. And he wanted to, so I said, oh, well, okay. And rather than leave me in the motel room totally by myself, he called a couple of the wives of the fraternity brothers. They came to the motel to kind of babysit me. I had never met them before. All I can say is, that was my introduction to understanding how you navigate life together with a husband, but at the same time trying the best you can to let him have his space and to still have your own. Although being with those strange women was not my idea of my own space. It did set an interesting, what would the word be? Can't think of the word, but we have over all these years figured out, and pretty well, how to live together, but also navigate our own little orbits, which is great, very great. Okay, so it was time, because everybody else was having babies. All our friends already in Omaha at that point had at least one child. And we came to I found out that we couldn't get pregnant. All right, so we set out to put together a family by adopting kids, and wound up adopting, I don't want to say wound up, that doesn't sound right. We found four, oh, so I'm going to start crying. We found four fabulous children in order of appearance: Kathy Nogg, Marcia Nogg, Shelley Nogg, and Tony Nogg. And I remember on our first anniversary, before any of the kids had arrived, Don and I went to Chicago, and we were on one of those boats that takes you on the Chicago River to kind of look at the buildings and stuff. And on the boat, there was a young couple with four children, little stair-step kids. And being so anxious and wanting kids so badly, we couldn't take our eyes off of that family. And I remember when the boat docked and we were all getting off, that Don and I both stopped and talked to the young couple, who were a little older than we were, but not much, and telling them how much we loved watching them interact with their four kids, and how we hoped one day, if not four, that we at least, that we would have a family like that and have that kind of fun together. And it turned out we did. We were extremely lucky. We still are extremely lucky. So the story of how Don and I adopted, found, put together a family. As I said, the first edition was Kathy. And we had help in that regard because Don's mother, Ruth, knew a physician and an attorney, both of whom were kind of shirt-tail relatives. They lived in California. And Ruth was the kind of mother-in-law who, well, she knew how to do things sort of under the radar so that you didn't know that she was working on your behalf, but she was great. She found us our first apartment, actually, after we had taken her to see the apartment that we thought was so gorgeous, and she said, "Oh, yeah, this is nice." And then a couple days later, she called and said, there's a place I'd like you to look at, which we did, and of course it was so much nicer than the one we thought was so nice. All right, so I have to give Ruth Nogg credit for our first apartment and for helping us with the first daughter. We flew to California when the day after the phone rang and said, "The baby's here." And we went to California, and Kathy was, 2 days old when we wrapped her up in a blanket and carried her with us through I remember a very thick fog from the hospital to the airport. Got on the plane, and I think the rules at that time were you could not travel with an infant that was younger than, 2 months maybe. And here I am with this baby that's still kind of red, and the stewardess walked by and said, "Oh, how old is your baby?" And I think I said a year. I was so nervous that they were going to throw us off the plane. Okay. 15 months later, again with the help of Ruth and the same physician and lawyer in California, we brought Marcia Nogg home. And now we had 2 little girls. They were, great fun in the wading pool in the backyard. Kathy a jumper in her crib. The 2 girls, from, I swear, the moment they looked at each other, were close, still are. So when Marcia, let's see, what's the difference in age? Shelley came 4 years later, and then 2 years after that, Anthony James, Tony Nogg arrived. And there we were, the 6 of us. Don and I have said to one another, and I think the kids would agree, though I don't remember having this exact conversation, that whole saying about you didn't grow in my body, but you grew in my heart. It sounds like such a cliche, but it's true. And how 4 unconnected souls wound up together, forgive me, it's been a blessing and continues to. All right, so here we are, a husband and a wife, Donald Nogg and Ozzie Nogg, and 4 children, Kathy, Marcia, Shelley, and Tony. And I decided that, well, I didn't decide. I'll tell you how this happened. Uni and Norm Denenberg, very good friends of ours, and okay, one Saturday we're deciding we're going to go out somewhere. What are we going to do? And Norm had read in the paper, I don't know why, but he had read that the Playhouse, Omaha Community Playhouse, was holding auditions for Pajama Game. And Uni and I both like showbiz, kind of. We had done things with council or whoever, you know. I had, as I said, done some shows at Central, at Brandeis, and Norm Denenberg said, why don't we go to dinner, and then the 4 of us will go to the Omaha Community Playhouse, and Uni and Ozzie can audition for the Pajama Game. So that's what we did. We went to the Playhouse, unprepared totally, and not knowing at all what to expect, but I think that I can't speak for Eunice, but I think that I thought, based on the experience that I had already had at Central and at Brandeis, that I was certainly, well, I might not get the lead, but the second lead. And we auditioned, sang a cappella because we didn't have any music, we hadn't brought anything with us. And while we're listening to other people audition, up on the stage walks this woman, found out later her name was Lou Filbert, opened up a mouth and, you know, I'm not at all in love. And Eunice and I knew immediately that if we were going to get in the show at all, it was not going to be as the leading lady. But we did get in, both of us, in the chorus. And Eunice had one line, I ate already, was her line. I had no lines, but we had so much fun. And the thing that made it possible was that both Norm and Donald were okay staying home, being the mom/dad while we were at rehearsals. We never could have done it otherwise. Pajama Game for me led to, oh gosh, other shows. Macbeth, I was a witch. Shows in the studio theater, where one of them, in fact, called 30, I wrote, or co-wrote, I should say, sorry, with George Hiring. I was in musicals, Apple Tree, did stuff in Council Bluffs, West Side Story, a lot of Playhouse shows, Barefoot in the Park, had a wonderful, wonderful time. And again, never would have happened without the help of Donald Nogg, who, pardon me, in all honesty, I think enjoyed going to the Playhouse and watching me in shows, maybe, well, I don't think more, but as much as I enjoyed being in them. That was a great, great time of life. My mother disapproved wholeheartedly. But she was good. She let me do it. She understood, but I will say that she thought it was not the proper thing for a young mom to leave the kids at home, even with a very loving father. Eunice and I, at a point in our lives, and the Playhouse was what led us there, I think, started doing voiceovers for commercials for advertising agencies in town. And one of them, when we left the recording studio, and we had read copy for, I don't know, an automobile agency or something, and she and I looked at each other and said, the copy was really boring, don't you think? Yeah. Well, we could write better copy than that, don't you think? For sure. And so, chutzpahdik, we called Millard Rosenberg, who at that time had an ad agency. We said, Millard, if you give us, let us write copy on the come, no money involved, for one of your clients, and just to see how it plays out. And he was a good sport. So he said, fine, write copy for X client, which we did, and he liked it. And so for about 6 months, I don't remember exactly, but for a while, we worked writing copy for Millard. And then Uni and I, the little business women, said, wait a second, doing this, there's a middleman, right? We could do it on our own and not have a middleman. So we, without a client, opened up an ad agency, named it Gemini. We did a lot of really good work. We won Addy Awards, and people knew who we were. Gemini was good. We had a very interesting way of working. Our clients understood early on that this was a little bit unorthodox. We got to the office when we wanted to get to the office, and we left basically when we wanted to leave. We always made deadlines. The client got whatever he or she wanted on. So the ad agency, Gemini, yes. We had an enormous amount of fun. We understood how to do the division of labor. Eunice was the one who would call the client if the bill was like 60 or 90 days past due and say, okay, we need our money. And if they would say, we'll put it in the mail tomorrow, she would go actually to the client and stand in the office until the client wrote the check, which worked very well. That was never my good. I had mentioned that my mother did not approve necessarily of all the time I spent at the Playhouse. She also was a little bit not so happy with the fact that Don and I, when the kids were young, would take a lot of trips. And she would take care of the kids. Ruth Nogg was happy to take care of the kids. We always felt very secure being in London or Paris or Israel or Hungary or Romania or wherever. But just as an aside, I'm glad that we did it then, because today we wouldn't be able to take the kind of trips we took back then. We kind of backpacked. We put the least amount of clothes in the smallest possible suitcase, traveled without reservations, drove everywhere, had some really amazing experiences, and made some friends, foreigners, with whom we still correspond, and people that we've met in foreign countries that have subsequently come and visited us. Okay, so traveling's always been, that was a big thing. Other big thing, Bethel Synagogue. Nate Nogg was president of Bethel Synagogue, Don Nogg was president of Bethel Synagogue, and I was president of Bethel Synagogue as well. And this was all during the time that Papa, Rabbi Alex Katz, was also at Bethel Synagogue. And my mother, Belle Katz, started and ran I think, the first nursery schools, certainly for Jewish kids in Omaha. And people today still stop and remind me, younger people than I, remind me of the days that they spent either in my mother's nursery school or in my father's classroom studying for their bar or bat mitzvah. And so Bethel Synagogue is a huge, huge part of the Katz Nogg life. At one point, after I left Germany, I got a little restless again. My friend Joni Jacobson and I were talking one day, and through a series, again, of synchronistic events, we put together a business called Two for the Show. And we wrote parodies for parties for people, for birthdays, for anniversaries. It was an enormous amount of fun. I guess, I don't know, I'm sitting here in front of a camera, that must mean something as well. Performing or if not performing, connecting with people, I'd prefer to put it that way. Connecting with people is something that has been very important to me forever. It continues to be. It took a different turn when I took stories that I had first written for a group that I performed with called the Five Bright Chicks. There were 5 women. We performed our own personal stories, and those stories of mine I put into a book called Joseph's Bones. There are 12 stories in the book. They're true, or at least the way I remember them. Stories of my childhood, stories that were inspired by things that my father told me, things that my grandparents, my Bobby and Zeta, told me, stories inspired by things that happened with our children. And that book is for me also a way of preserving history for my kids. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, I started this interview with my friend Joni Bernstein, and sort of in the middle, I had a brain freeze or a senior moment, or whatever you want to call it. And so Joni gave me an assignment. It was very sweet of her. She turned off the camera and said, all right, why don't you go home and think about who your friends are that you've had forever, and see if you can't redo the part about the 5 bright chicks where you couldn't remember one of the names of the chicks. You can talk about your grandkids, whatever. So I went home and I made myself a list. Okay, these are the assignments. All right. Also, just for the record, since we're doing this 2 weeks afterwards, I don't know how Renee edits, but you know when you go to the movies and in one scene the heroine's hair is this way and in another scene it's that way, I think they call it continuity. So if I have on something different right this moment than in other moments, you'll know why. Okay, little disclaimer. All right, for the record, the 5 Bright Chicks, fabulous storytelling group. We were together for, gosh, I don't remember, maybe 6 years. We told our own stories, which I think I already mentioned the first time around. And the group included Rita Paskowitz, Lucy Duncan, Peg Renicky, Vicki Baines, whose name I forgot, and I was the 5th one. And we told our own stories, personal stories, and in the process, they turned into they turned into little mini memoirs, out of which, for me, came this book, Joseph's Bones, a collection of stories that I wrote and illustrated. And one of the happiest, kind of most melancholy experiences of my life was going through my life and putting down some of what I had lived in stories. My brother Michael, who is 7 years younger than I am, insists in some cases that none of it happened. As I said to him, it's my story and I get to tell it however I want. I was very lucky. I entered in a self-published book contest in 2004 and it won first prize. How cool. Nonetheless, in spite of that, I have many boxes of books left. Today is July 5th, 2017. I have many boxes of books left. So if anybody out there seeing this video wants one, what do you say? Call the 800 number at the bottom of your screen. I'm kidding, but somebody will know where they are. Right now they're in a closet in my house. Another one of the assignments that Joni Bernstein gave me, I'm going to keep mentioning her, and you can hear her laughing in the background. Why not? It's part of the process. She asked me to please go home and think about friendship and enduring friendships, although all friendships are valuable. As I sit here today, July 7th, 2017, I'm coming up to a 63rd wedding anniversary in August with my Donald. We, since the very first day we were married, have been fortunate enough to stay with the same friends. We've added, we've lost, but the core friendships go back, for me, at least 63 years, and for Don, even longer, because some of the husbands of the couples he knew from the time he was maybe 5. He went to grade school and high school with them. But my first entree into that group of friends was when we were very, very newly married, and Beth L. was putting on a Purim carnival. In those days, big, huge event. Charlotte Zapersky and Donald Nogg wound up being the co-chairman of that. And from that carnival, I did a little bit of work, but mainly I palled around with Charlotte. And then I got to pal around with her husband, Morley. And so Don and Ozzie Nogg and Charlotte and Morley Zapersky have been buddies forever and still are, thank goodness, to this day. Other old longtime friends, Joanne and Jerry Freeman, Alan and Betsy Tully, Gary and Barbara Goldstein. Gary Goldstein was a classmate of mine at Saunders School, went on to become an architect, great work, and Gary designed a house for Don and me and our family back in the 1960s. It was wonderful. Oh gosh, who am I leaving out? Bella Eisenberg, Uni and Norm Denenberg, Margie and Marlon Somberg, love them both, miss him a lot. Did I say Alan and Betsy? I think I did. It's okay. I'll say it twice. The point being that, at least in our case, this community afforded us the opportunity, and I can't explain why, but the friends that we made are the friends that we've kept. And it's a blessing. It's a gift for which I'm really grateful. I don't know that our kids have the opportunities with all the moving to different cities and different jobs and what have you. They don't have the opportunity to establish those kinds of deep roots with friends. And they're fine, they're cool, they're happy, and I'm happy for them. But I think what we have is really something very, very special. And Omaha helps foster that. Love you, Omaha. Love you. When Uni Denenberg and I were at Gemini Advertising, one of our favorite clients was a wonderful shop named Gila. It was, well, the location now is gone, so that makes no difference. But for people that knew Gila and loved it, it was a shop that imported jewelry, art, some clothes, all from Israel. And the shop was owned by Charlotte Zapersky and her sister Sylvia Jess and their sister-in-law, Ruth Katzman. And Eunice and I designed print ads for them, which was a great lot of fun. I would draw little Israeli figures, and they ran into the Jewish press, of course. One of the other jobs that I had at Gila was display. I was kind of in charge with Ruth Katzman of setting up the windows and the cabinets and the shelves with all the goods. And she and I had an enormous amount of fun. I remember one display we used white kidney beans all over, and then we put the rings and the bracelets and the little statues in the kidney beans. And the problem for me was, once that little scenario was done, I wanted it to stay that way. But the three women that owned the shop wanted people to buy the goods, obviously. And it took everything I had. If I was in the store and someone came in and said, "Oh, I want, please, that bracelet," and that's right. Joni's giving me off-stage cues. Exactly. No, you can't have it because it's going to destroy my display. Well, I got over that, but that was a wonderful store. And when it went out of business, there were a lot of people who were not real happy about it. Gila was good. We liked Gila. Okay. Don and his older brother Alvin and his cousin, younger than he, Alan Nogg, together with Don and Alvin's father, Nate Nogg, and Alan's father, Ernie Nogg, all worked at Nogg Paper Company. The older two, Nate and Ernie, started it, of course. Don joined the group right after he left college. It was not necessarily what he wanted to do. But back in those days, very often, I'm told, I remember, young men joined the family business. Donald Nogg always wanted to be somehow in the world of geography, but his uncle and his dad convinced him, no, there probably wasn't a living, if you're going to have a family, to be made out of geography. So fine. He worked at Nogg Brothers for years. It was perfectly perfect. And it afforded us the opportunity to get into the geography part of Don's loves by traveling. We started traveling very early on in our marriage, before we had kids. But even after we had children, because we had two bobbies in town who were very, very happy to watch the kids while we were gone, we ran away from home a lot. We've been lucky to go to some very interesting foreign places. Always drove off the beaten path, rarely with a reservation, and ran into some interesting experiences and met some interesting people, foreign people, in their little towns, even though we often I love Joni. She's given me cues. Yeah, where? In Romania, in Hungary, in, oh my gosh, here we go again, in the Caribbean, in Belgium, Holland. Yeah, yes. In Romania, we were walking down the street in Sighișoara, I believe is the name of the town. And we passed by a building, this was around dinner time, we passed by a building and we heard a lot of laughter and applause coming out. And the door was open, so we walked in wearing our jeans and our denim shirts. And we found ourselves in the lobby of a little theater. And even though we didn't know what was going on and the woman at the ticket counter didn't speak English, we wound up sitting, she escorted us down in the middle of the show to the first row. There were 2 empty seats. It was shared. Long story, try to make it short. We're sitting and we can see that a woman to the left of us is kind of craning her neck. Who are these strangers? The show was over. She comes up to us and in broken English, we start a conversation and we wind up in the home of this Romanian couple. His name was, oh gosh, it doesn't make any difference. We wound up in their home, and through my limited French and Don's limited French and a little bit of Yiddish, which kind of worked into German, we were able somehow to have a conversation with them that lasted well through the night. On the wall in their apartment was hanging an old Hanukkah, and I asked the man, I said, are you Jewish? No, I got it from a friend, some long Misa. And I said, if it doesn't mean anything particularly to you, can I buy it from you? No, you can't do that. Okay. Don and I, after we left that couple, and we took a lot of pictures of them in Romania. When we had the film developed, all the pictures that were taken up to the point that we met this couple, the Dragomirs, that was their name, all the pictures taken before we met them and all the pictures taken after we met them came out great. But the pictures that we took of them in Romania or Transylvania, if you want to look at it that way, where Dracula lived, they were blank. All right, I mean, that's a true story. It's weird. I've got goosebumps now thinking about it. We took our kids on a wonderful trip. Marcia was on a kibbutz in Israel. Kathy had just graduated from college. Kathy and Tony and Shelley and Don and I flew to Israel, met Marcia, toured the country, and then went to Greece and Turkey. And we were gone for a month. In Turkey, we met another Jewish couple, because I still think the Dragomirs were, and we're afraid to talk about it. In Turkey, we met another Jewish couple. How we met them, on the dance floor, one of those things. And they invited us to their summer home on the Sea of Marmara, which is part of the Bosphorus, I think, for Shabbos dinner. It's great. So we got on a ferry boat, went to their little town, went to shul in their little synagogue, where the sermon was given in Turkish, which, just like Romanian, we don't understand it. But you could tell that the Rebbe was really upset about something, because he kept saying, radio, television, and cigarettes. Well, he was giving a lecture of some sort. There was no question about that. And at their house for Shabbos dinner, boiled chicken, white rice, everything white. They asked Don to make the kiddush, which he was happy to do. And their 2 teenage daughters giggled because, we sounded different than the people that they were used to being with. the kids talk about that yet. Our Shabbos night on the Sea of Marmara. Then we took the ferry boat home, and Marcia, God bless her, she threw up everything that she had eaten off the side of the boat. Well, that's the story. In the world of traveling, it was shortly after the 6-Day War. Don and I, just the two of us, went to Israel. That was our first trip. And part of the trip involved getting on a little Egged bus and going to the Sinai. And it was so soon after the end of the war that some of the tanks and other armored vehicles were still kind of by the side of the road. And we traveled on the bus to Sharm el-Sheikh and to Santa Catarina Monastery, which stands at the foot of a big mountain that the Bedouins call Jebel Musa, that's supposed to be Mount Sinai. I believe it is. We stayed in the monastery. There were, I don't know, maybe 10 people. I was the only woman. We stayed in the monastery at night, and at 3 in the morning, the monks woke us up to get ready to climb Jebel Musa to get to the top, obviously. And we ate hard-boiled eggs. I remember that. I also remember that the Bedouin were smoking something that smelled very interesting. It was definitely hash. So, I don't know, maybe that secondhand smoke is what gave me the feeling when we got to the top of Jebel Musa and looked down. By then the sun had come up. You could, if you have that kind of mind, you could imagine all the Israelites standing down there with Moses at the top and receiving the 10 Commandments. It was an extremely moving and powerful experience. We walked down when we were done, and in the courtyard of the monastery is a bush. Picture in your mind the most shriveled up, dried, almost dead bush that you can, no leaves. But the monks there insist that it is the original burning bush. I wrote a story about that for the Jewish press, and on a whim, I decided, what the heck, I'll send it to a few other Jewish weeklies around the country. And some of them picked it up. It was fun to see a byline, but it was more fun to see that story. And it was done they ran it at Shavuos time because of the giving of the Torah, the 10 Commandments, and all of that. And it was nice to think that other people were reading the story and maybe tying it in to their own Shavuos celebration. So, yeah, Jebel Musa, go there. My papa, the rabbi, his name was Alexander, and our granddaughter, Alexandra Pitchik, is named for Papa. When it was time for Alex to prepare for her bat mitzvah, she asked me if I would help her, which I was thrilled and happy to do. And so she would come to our house after school periodically or on the weekend, and we'd sit down and start going through her Haftorah. And one day, we'd been at it for a while. I didn't help her with the Torah reading because I don't know about that. I don't know how to do that. But the Haftorah, we were really getting into it. And one day, we're sitting in our den. She's got her book, I've got my book, and she stopped and she said, "Bobby, I want to tell you about a dream I had." Okay? She said, and it's been happening more than once, and I don't even know if it's a dream. It kind of feels like he's really in the room. What is that, Alexandra? There's this man He's sitting in a rocking chair, and he's got a little, kind of a little beard, and he's in my room. And then he's gone. And she went on to describe him a little bit more in depth, and I started getting goosebumps. And I showed her a picture. She had seen pictures of my father before, but I showed her a particular photograph of my dad. And I didn't say anything, but she said to me, Bobby, I think that's, well, all right, you can poo-poo it all you want, but I don't. I am quite certain that for the period of time that I was helping Alex with her Haftorah, my father, whether he was really in the room, whether he was on my shoulder, wherever he was, the way he helped me with mine kind of went through me into the experience of helping Alex with hers. So, I think there are angels around. I really do. Thanks, Papa. The Nogg name and Bethel Synagogue, just like the cat's name and Bethel Synagogue, are really, really tight. Don's father, Nate, was president of Bethel. Donald himself was president of Bethel. And I was president of Bethel, the first woman president of Bethel. And as luck would have it, my presidency took place, or however you want to say it, my presidency was during the time when the congregation decided to talk about building a new building. There had been conversation some years before, but now we were really going to do it. And I'm not a political animal at all. And the meetings about where we should build the building, how the money should be raised, what assessment, if there should be an assessment, should every member get, all of that stuff got to be pretty heated. I remember one particular total congregational meeting where I was in charge with the gavel, and we were going to talk about how we were going to pay for this building. I was terrified. The only way I got through it was because I had Forrest Crutter of blessed memory. Forrest Crutter, one of the brightest, sweetest, most off-the-wall people I've ever known. Forrest Crutter standing right here by me. He knew Robert's Rules of Order inside out. And whenever somebody made an objection or this or that, Forrest, we got through the meeting, and it went well because he, in essence, was guiding it. Got through the meeting, got home that night from the meeting at, 10:15, and sure as shooting, 10:20, my phone rings, and it's Forrest. And we talked about that. We patted one another on the back over the phone. If you didn't know Forrest, you missed out on a treat. And here we are, New Bethel Synagogue. Not so new anymore, but to have been part of that was a good time in my life too, politics or not. One day, my kids and my husband, they've stopped now, but there was a time when, how would I put it? I had the reputation of being a dilettante, though nobody used that word exactly. But I was either taking photographs and entering photography contests, or making baby clothes and trying to sell them to local children's stores, various things like that. And my kids and my husband would say, there she goes again, okay. So one of the there she goes agains, I decided to do a line of greeting cards, very narrow in their focus, called them Parav cards, appropriate for any occasion, get it? And the copy was all taken from Talmudic sayings, rabbinic sayings, old wives' tales, all very Yiddish. oriented, but in English, of course. The drawings on the front were basically the same. It showed little black line, I should have brought one. I'll send one. Little black line drawings of yeshiva buchers or little rabbonim sitting with a book. And there would be, there was a get well card that the copy was stolen right out of something that apparently people in the shtetl used to do. It said something like, okay, if you're not feeling well, take a chicken leg and boil it with a half an onion and throw in some pepper and put it outside in your yard under the moon and this and that. And then you open it up and it says, go for it, what could it hurt? Well, okay. There were birthday cards, there were anniversary cards, you two belong together, like the Talmud says, every pot has its lid. I was bound and determined to put Hallmark out of business, at least in the world of Jewish greeting cards. And I did sell greeting cards. People in Omaha are wonderfully supportive, we of our own, or at least we try to be. Friends bought my cards. I took them to the Rose Blumkin Jewish Home, to the Bethel Synagogue, to other places, and people would buy the cards. Hallmark did not buy the cards. I sent packages of them to Jewish bookstores across the country. Only Omaha bought the cards. So, just like Joseph's Bones, if you're in the market for greeting cards with a Jewish slant, again, call the number at the bottom of this screen. I've got dozens of them in my basement, so go for it. My mother, excuse me, my mother was a fabulous seamstress. And she made all my clothes from the time I was really little, obviously, until I went to college. I've written a story about her. If you read Joseph's Bones, you'll see about the way she finished all the seams. Wonderful. I don't know if it was because of the fact that my clothes were almost always homemade when I was growing up, but the idea of shopping, although I love to shop, but spending lots of money on clothes that you look at and say, oh my God, my mother could make this and make it better for peanuts. Maybe that's part of the reason that I have so much fun going to thrift shops or secondhand clothing stores to shop. And it had gotten to the point where when I would go to the Goodwill store to buy jeans or a sweater or something, I would only look for items that had the special color of the day that were 99 cents each. And I would occasionally buy something for $3.99, I will admit. But if I got something for 99 cents that had a designer label in it, and you can, I was talking earlier about my inability to stay with one thing. You know, first one day it's photographs, and then the next day it's something else, greeting cards. So at one point, and I don't know why, I made little dolls. Hello. And, oh, well, this kind of ties in with my thrift shop, Goodwill. These are all old socks and old t-shirts. At the time, I could get a bunch of them for 99 cents, not just one. So I made a whole bunch of these dolls, little wacky things, and thinking that, I don't know who I was going to put out of business, not Hallmark, but somebody. And again, friends in Omaha, bless their hearts. I put a bunch of them at Bethel during a Hanukkah, what do they call those? It was bazaar, a Hanukkah bazaar, and my friends bought them. And my children I gave dolls to, and my grandchildren each have one. And that's it. This is the last man standing, and I'm not ever going to make any more of these ever again. They're a pain in the neck, but they're kind of cute. So every story has a beginning, like a prologue, and supposed to, not every, but books have epilogues as well. And I don't think I have a message of goodwill for all mankind or anything like that to say, but when I look back and think about the life I've lived, which has been truly blessed, ups and downs, sure, but bottom line, blessed. What would I want for my kids or my grandkids? I would want for them to have the same kind of mazel that apparently I've had with Don. And I would hope that the friends that they have, they would be able to keep. And I would wish them the ability to remember to be kind to one another, to be good to other people, to be respectful, all those old-fashioned kinds of values that sometimes I look around today in 2017 and wonder where they've gone. But be patient. Listen to who's telling you to be patient, because that's not my long suit. But be patient, be kind, be generous with your time and your talent and your money if you have it to give. Look around the world and appreciate what you've got. Be thankful for it. And know that I love you. So, that's my story, or at least as much of it as I remember. The thing about stories is we all have them. Every one of us has a story to tell, or stories to tell. And I would encourage everyone who's watching this, whether you're my family, my kids, my grandkids, friends, people in the community, I would encourage you to tell your stories too. They're very important. They're important, to me at least, because they remind us of who we are, where we came from. They connect us to our roots. Stories help us stay connected to our tradition. Stories express the way we feel about people, sometimes the way we feel about ourselves, our communities. At any rate, whether it's telling your story in a little book, taking photographs, share it with your kids, or do this, you can come to the Nebraska Jewish Historical Society. Renee Corcoran or Jeremy Bernstein can help walk you through it, and it happens to be a lot of fun. So, there you have it. Ozzie Nogg, her story. Love you.